Welcome to the Crazy Wisdom podcast. My guest here is Chris Lucas. He is the CEO and co-founder of Ompractice, a website where you can do live streaming yoga classes from the comfort of your own home. Really excited to have you on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Here.
So can you tell people more about Ompractice and what it is and why you're doing it?
Yeah, it was the missing piece for me as a yoga teacher and a yoga student. And what it exists now is sort of I don't know if it's a technology or an interactivity layer for sort of student teacher studio, the yoga world. But right now it exists as a platform for interactive live yoga and meditation classes that you can take from anywhere. So yeah, via two-way video, group classes where your teacher sees you. And I'll stop there.
So yeah, and I as we were talking about before the show, I've experience where I've taught one-on-one students, and the biggest hurdle that I've found in explaining it to most people and them thinking it's a good idea is that they think it won't work, but then think it's not effective, but then they try it and you lose about 5 to 10%. I would say the only problem is that in the one-on-one classes, I would have to ask them to move the camera up and down when going from standing to seated. But it wasn't that big of a deal, really. In group classes, I never tried a group class. How has that been going into group classes and stuff like that?
It's actually pretty similar in terms of, ahead of time, you can also like plan for the thing you just talked about, right? And say like about halfway through when you transition to the floor, I might ask some of you to, adjust your cameras so you can, I can see you. And that is usually not that much of a disruption. Think about like, it sounds like you certainly practice. So like people stop to drink some water or something like that. So there is that moment of pause, intentional or otherwise. And so it actually, like in the group setting, it's actually been really nice because I have found, just as a student as well, and like anytime I have a one-on-one class with a teacher, it feels like intimate, almost performative for me, right? It's intimidating as a student. Like I want to do well. Like it's hard to like back off and relax a little bit when someone's always watching, always watching. But if you're in, 9, 10, even 20 or more people, like there's you're seen and well held, but at the same time, it's not creepy and it's not like it's not intense in a way that makes you feel unsuccessful.
Interesting. And can you talk more? Before we started recording, you said you've had this idea since 2009. Can you talk more about where it came from?
Yeah. Oh yeah. So my wife, she is amazing, and she got a clerkship in California, and at the time we were living in Boston. I was working as a lobbyist for the American Cancer Society, but I was teaching yoga on the side, and teaching sort of more and more and getting into assisting. And I was really like actually starting to get an understanding of what it means to be a teacher and help students develop. And it was cool, like seeing someone's trajectory shift because of something we worked together on. But also my wife had this incredible opportunity. There was no way we were saying no. And so we packed up and moved to San Diego for just over a year. And in that time, I was like, well, I'm not lobbying in the State House in Massachusetts anymore. And two was like, what am I going to do next? And I had been doing sort of like online sports writing and stuff like that, like on the side, just because like I've always kind of like always kept something else to do. I don't know if like, it just like the same way, like sometimes like playing guitar while I'm talking will make me think of different things. Right. Similarly with like working on a project on the side. And so I was doing that, but I was also teaching a lot. And so I was like, oh, how do I do this? So when we got out to San Diego, I was like, oh, I'm going to teach full-time. I'm going to be a full-time yoga teacher. And then we did like some back of the envelope math. And I was like, I will be below the federal poverty line. 3 classes a week. Yeah. Like that's insane. Yeah. And like the time spent before class, after class, like it's, it could be 40 to 60 hours a week easy. And you could easily not be able to cover just your grocery bill. And so that was sort of a big awakening where I was like, wow, teaching yoga full-time is not a financially sane decision.
Unless you have a large roster of one-on-one clients and you charge.
Right. absolutely. And yeah, like, so I should amend that. It's not a financially sane decision for most teachers, and certainly not necessarily beginner teachers, unless for whatever reason they're tapped into a network where that's just going to happen.
Yep.
And like, that was one of the first moments where I was like, wow, this must just take a lot of teachers out of the game, period. Right. And then the other part of me was like, well, the internet exists, so this should not be. And sometimes like should not be is not a great place to come from, but like I will credit like it in terms of like it forced me to be like, well, Mindbody Online exists, and Skype at the time was like the video provider of the day, and I was like, all right, well, I'll just like hack together a mashup of the two. And it was awful and brutal, and it didn't really work well. Like I had a couple people try, and it was just like, no, this isn't working at all. So I shelved it. And then years passed, and like I worked as a digital director for a large yoga brand for a while. I did like wellness and digital consulting for pro athletes and all that stuff. And then finally I was asked, like, we wanted to move to the home office. And I'm a big believer in remote work. I would sit in my like office in Boston before, and like we're all emailing each other from the same room, and that just I found that super infuriating. Like I could at least be having my laundry happening right now, right? Yeah. Like so, the idea of geography being a limitation has always kind of stuck with me. And I don't know, and so I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to go do this. Like I'm not going to go move to the home office. I want to stay where we are. We had moved back to Massachusetts at that point, and I'm going to start my own thing. And so like I did some consulting, and right after my daughter was born, and my wife was like, whatever happened to the remote yoga thing? I was like, well, the technology like isn't there. The video it totally exists. I have to do this. I'm quitting the consultancy I started and doing this. Is that okay? And I asked it that fast, so she couldn't really say anything. And then it was sort of like, oh, okay. Like literally 2 months in, I had like some friends and teachers, and at that point, I have quite a good network of the yoga industry as a whole. That might not always be true, but it's true now, kind of thing. And I asked some friends and some teachers to just try it, and that was when I was like, wait, I only told 5 people, and like 30 people are showing up. That's cool. That's that's information. And then people were paying for it by September, and then we'd raise money by December. It was that kind of like.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that most people don't understand about what you're doing and when I was teaching one-on-one classes is that there is a significant difference between practicing in a recorded fashion when you're just watching a video and doing it live with somebody. And there's something about the shared space, the shared thinking space, or shared mental, emotional space that's really
absolutely
powerful. Yeah.
And because there's an energetic exchange, right? So someone's meeting you where you are in the moment, which is wildly different than this sort of idea like, okay, I'm gonna like teach to camera and really like behind my back and my fingers crossed hoping this works out. That's just a different energy. And then I mean this is like either to my credit, like it's either my best weapon or my poison. Like it should be fundamentally like an expectation as a student that your teacher gets to see you in anything. And as a teacher, like it should be a fundamental expectation that you get to see your students. And like, I think more and more companies, there's like awesome companies like Masterclass and I was gonna say Tech, it's not Tech, it's Tech Exchange, and like there's amazing communities that are that like have pre-recorded education, and I think that's super valuable. And more the production value is getting to the point where it does feel intimate. I do feel seen, and we're creating like avenues that like sort of increase like levels of interactivity. But like I'm just sort of like, let's just go right down the gut, the thing that matters, and like fine, the logistics are a headache, great, I'm willing to solve that because I think it's important.
Interesting. How are you doing a bunch of classes? Are you taking a bunch of classes?
I teach less than I used to. I used to teach all the classes. And like literally the first student on Ompractice was like my mom, like 2 years ago. Will it pass the Judy Lucas test? Had to be like number one. And like, is this something like I would ask people, like, I'm not willing to ask people to do something I'm not willing to do myself. So I do teach. It's more infrequent. But in part because like my role has transitioned from teaching a lot to like, okay, how do I create opportunities for the existing and emerging generations of teachers who otherwise are going to be like I was even 10 years ago, where it's like, no, I cannot make this work. Like the sort of like the yoga gig economy, and like, it's not working. So like in some ways I feel like, well, I'm taking a spot that I know someone else could feel successful in. And like, I feel fulfilled when I get to teach. And I want to make that possible for other people. And yeah, I mean, but I absolutely still teach, because again, like it's hard. It's important to be, if I want to have any credibility, then I need to be willing to do the same thing myself. And that it also forces me to stay current and stay up to date.
Are you taking classes?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is like kind of selfish in that sense. Like I get to like take classes from teachers I really admire.
Yeah.
Who are just like immensely talented,
yeah.
and some who like initially came onto the platform like almost as a favor to me, and then realized, oh, this works, and like you can make good money on Ompractice as a teacher. So like, oh, that's kind of nice, and I don't have to like give up my other teaching stuff. Like I can teach more rather than instead of. But yeah, I absolutely take classes.
Did you take Leslie Kamenhoff's class? Or
I'm taking it tonight.
Oh, okay. There's one tonight. Wow.
Yeah.
What time?
Yeah. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern, so it'd be 6 p.m. San Francisco.
Well, maybe I'll join too.
That'd be fun.
I went and did a workshop with him when I was in Paris, which was really great. He's an excellent teacher. I've learned a lot about anatomy from him. So
yeah, and it's just like I'm trying to create like those moments of like, this is insane. Like Leslie Kamenoff can see me like in my living room or wherever you decide you are, like, and like I don't have to go to Bali or Paris or whatever. Like the opportunity for exchange and educate, like forget time zones, forget geography, like we can make things possible. So I'm psyched about that. Yeah.
Are you thinking about virtual reality and the potential for that in the future?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean that has to be what most people think of in some way. Like there is obviously a layer of that where, again, like how do I want to practice? And right now we live in this world that's my dog shaking. I feel like we live in this world which more and more is like becoming like, how do we be together alone? You know, like, or how do we be alone together? Like I want to practice, but I want to be at my house. And like, so like a lot of like the AR, VR kind of stuff is like, how do you attend like this sporting event? And then, you know, you've got like your headset on or whatever it'll be. And you look to your right and there's your friend, and you look to your left and there's your other friend. And like, I can see, obviously there's applications for that for yoga. I can also see like, you can look to your right, see your friend, look to your left and see LeBron James, right? And like some sort of integration like with athlete, like, so I mean, there's all sorts of cool stuff we can do. I think part of the issue that yoga is waiting to see solved is the self-referencing, right? Like, because you move in relationship to your body so often. So you need to be able to see your feet and the approximation. You need to be able to like kind of move that kind of way. But it's coming, and it's not coming in 10 years. It's coming in 3. Right?
Interesting.
If not earlier. Like literally, it's like going to be 2 or 3 little problems that get solved, and it's like it's ready. And I'll be damned if I miss that window.
Totally. My friend who's in VR, if you ever saw the game Beat Saber, she was the woman who did the demo for Beat Saber, and that was like you had lightsabers and stuff like that. She showed me a new game. She showed me a new game which was really interesting, which is it's dancing basically. It teaches you how to dance with the controllers. And it was like an intense workout, and it was great. So that kind of like blew my mind in terms of how it is already here, that we can already use a virtual reality to improve our physical health and stuff like that.
Right. And I think like to your point earlier, like people are looking to like, there's an energy to that interaction that it cannot be, it cannot be like manufactured. So you actually need to have these moments of like, I see you and I understand I'm being seen. And I think VR and AR is going to like just be a huge leap forward in that. I don't know, like then we're going to start learning like actually how real is sort of like the physical energies in terms of like being present. Like how real is that? Because we're going to take it out completely, right? And it'll be all AR, VR. Like how much of that really is matters, and how much of that, like how much gets lost in losing that? And it might be 0, and that'd be crazy to learn, but like, or it might be like huge, and then there'll be a whole, return to like sort of like a Luddite yoga practice, and you all have to be together. But I have a feeling like that it's going to be less than people. it's going to be less important than people want it to be.
Mm.
And myself included.
Yep.
But yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's the interesting thing I think about a lot, because I do about half my interviews, like what we're doing right now, on Zoom, and then about half in person. There is something about being in person, but it is not as large as most people think it is, and most of it has to do with just educating and exposure. The more interviews I do remotely, the more I tune into that energy remotely, and like less I need to be in person to do those interviews, which is something really interesting.
Yeah.
Let's have a conversation about yoga philosophy, if you're down. What has been one concept or one thing that you've learned in yogic philosophy over the past month or so that you've been thinking about, that's in the top of your mind, that's changed your life? Something on those lines.
Well, something I've learned in the last month that's changed my life.
Yeah. Or got you thinking something like, I'll start with an example. For me, it's samskara. Like a few months ago, the notion of samskara, like an impression, a subtle impression that's left on in my experience, and is in some ways influencing my current behavior, even though it's from the past. That's been a really important concept for me that I've been working on. What's something that you've been working on recently?
So there's an element of non-stealing. And I have always thought of that as being like pretty literal, right? Money. And I think there was a time where like I realized, sometimes like not contributing counts as theft. And so while often it's like it's easier to not say something or not make a wave, or just like I'm worried that I might just make something more complicated, or I've like decided you already, Stewart, would be irritated by my contribution, even though I have no reason to believe that actually. Like that the lack of contribution, the lack of me contributing is theft. And like that to me changed a lot. And I don't know why that did, like why just getting that, like that twist made such an impression on me, but it literally just changed how I talk with people, how my willingness to say what I'm thinking, but also like not just what I'm thinking, because like sometimes it's really easy to like think your opinions are important because you're thinking them, right? But like, so like, how can I contribute, right? And I don't know. So that's one thing that like has stuck with me in terms of like from yogic philosophy. Like, yes, like non-stealing is important, and absence is a form of theft.
And that's a really interesting point. I've been studying a lot of body work and the science behind body work, and there's this great body worker named Dean Juan, who is also a philosopher and takes a lot of what he learns from philosophy and neuroscience, and he wrote this amazing book called Job's Body. And he talks about if you have a thought, you have a spark, you have an intuition, you have this what Christopher Wallace calls this Icha Shakti, this internal intuition to create, which is a divine creation. Then and if you have that and you don't, there's only three ways you can get it out. You can either speak about it, you can write about it, or you can express it through your body, action, yoga, or something like that. And what you're talking about is like a form of that. It's like, if you have that and it's valid and it's true and it's not a creation of the neuroses of the mind, and you don't express it, that is a form of theft, essentially. Theft of what that could potentially lead to in someone else.
You are robbing someone of an experience due to your own hang-ups or your own, like, frankly, stinginess, right? And like that robs possibility from people. And like, there's like, there's like a long, like, butterfly effect of that. So it has made me more likely to be generous when I can, but also has made me think more about what I have to say, because if you believe that what you say matters, then I'll speak for myself. I tend to be more careful in what I say, I hope. But I say it with you, like, where it's coming from a good place to contribute. And I think that I hope that matters.
And then, yeah, another kind of nuance I've been thinking about in terms of that is the intention for it. I found myself in the past oftentimes saying things to get attention, or saying things to share a sense of fulfillment that I have in my own experience. And I feel like the latter one, that sharing because it needs to come out because I'm already so full, is a much more sustainable way to do it than rather than like grasping, like, in yoga, like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's funny, like saying like intention, because I feel like that's such a casual word for
Mm-hmm.
like, set an intention. Like, just go ahead, just go set an intention. And
Uh-huh.
like, I guess like you could do a drive-by of that, but it really is like you're asking a lot of somebody, and to like set it and put it into like your body, into practice. Like I mean, that's sort of like where Instagram yoga and all that stuff, like it comes in, where it's like there is a dilution here, and like we need, as a community in general, but as like maybe not a species, but language matters.
Mm-hmm.
And like, just like, set an intention. Like, yeah, I mean, you set a casual intention, you'll get a casual like attachment to that intention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. It just made me think of like, in terms of like setting intention, like, when I'm doing it, what's behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that gets into kind of like self-inquiry, and inquiry has been really important for my own practice recently. It's just like probably one of the most fundamental things I've been doing recently is just sitting in front of a paper, in front of the computer, or even doing it in my own, and just asking myself questions about like that thought that just came to my mind. What is the source of that thought?
Mm-hmm.
What is the observer of that thought? Who is that? Who am I? And all these different things, and just like kind of digging deeply into everything. And it's really, really beneficial, I found, because then it's like, because that's basically why you hire a coach or someone else, is to ask you questions that you're not asking yourself, and you can do that for yourself too, I think. Like,
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have a whole theory on the whole coaching thing, but like,
yeah.
but I don't know what theory. But it's funny, like, so I remember an exercise I did. Maybe it was some teacher training or something, but like you literally sat down with somebody who you were like in this training with. You sat across and you just basically said, like, who are you? Right. And then the person lists, like, I am a father. And then the person says again, who are you? And like, you basically just start listing like all like the, like sort of the identity things. I am a dog owner. I'm a brother. I'm a friend. Like, and like, it can go on for a while, but at some point you just start running out of descriptors, and it gets really interesting. And then finally, like at some point you're just kind of like, you're out of ideas of like all like the things you've been told you are, thought you are. And people have really profound experiences. Like, I'm not necessarily any of these things that I've been saying I am, or I have identified with for the last 30 years. And I don't have to be those, like that's funny. Like, so like, yeah, you're doing your own version of that, only you're just doing it back at yourself with a piece of paper. That's pretty cool.
And that's what Ramana Maharshi talked about. His whole thing, like, and he never wrote it down. It would always be written down by other people. His whole thing was just basically sit down with yourself and ask yourself the question, who am I? Just ask it over and over and over again until you get to the truth. And he said it's the most direct path towards what yogis look for.
Huh.
Mm-hmm.
That's lovely.
Yeah. I'd really interested. This is an interesting thought that just came to my mind. So Ramana Maharshi, like, really powerful person who changed a lot of people's lives, but people had to come to Tamil Nadu in India to go visit him and figure out to get his message. But then people recorded his stuff as well. But now with the internet, what is the internet going to do? And I think you what you're building might actually, like, it's interesting. Are you guys thinking about not only meditation classes and yoga classes, but yoga dharma talks and anything like that?
Absolutely. Actually, there's a woman, Shauna Small, from the Ashtanga Yoga Project out of North Carolina, literally just doing that. Just doing dharma talks, and just talking about, so it's not asana, right? And the meditation classes are awesome too. But yeah, there has to be that, like, how do we also have conversations, and how do we transfer, like, any transfer of learning in this space I'm interested in, because I feel like it's underserved already. The messengers have only been the people who either got there first, or like the people who are like at the top don't necessarily deserve to be there. So like, let's get a little democratization in terms of the messenger. And yeah, I mean, like that's the ball game. It's exactly what you're talking about.
That's so interesting. I'm so curious, as a founder and also in the yoga world, it's an interesting mix that a lot of people don't have access to, but I'm interested to talk to you because I've started a company in the past as well, and I'm starting a company now. And also yoga's played a huge part of my life. Meditation's played a huge part of my life. And then you have people like John McAfee. I don't know do you know who John McAfee is?
I don't think so.
So John McAfee is very famous in cryptocurrencies. Crazy. He's out there.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking like yoga world. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, that's the interesting part. So McAfee made a whole bunch of money in anti-security software, and then took that money and then created a yoga retreat center, wrote like 4 books on yoga, on the Yoga Sutras and stuff like that, and created his own cult in the Colorado mountains. So a lot of people don't think that yoga, meditation, and founders mix, but then in San Francisco, 1960s, 1970s, like it's clear that but they don't talk about it, and they're starting to talk about it more. And this is what I get into in the show.
Oh yeah.
So
it's coming back. It's coming through San Francisco again the way it did in the 60s, right? Like it's like Walt Baptiste and like Baptiste not like came with Yogananda and through San Francisco, right? And like now it's just like coming up again, and it's more like tech enabled, and so it's like Torch or whatever. You read Justin Ken's Twitter feed, but like it comes in some way where it's like, oh, all right, like here is the new way, but it's coming from different voices and not sort of like this is the guru and the guru is up here. It makes me excited and also a little nervous, right? Because like the platform is a platform. Like I was just harping on like, oh, some people got there and they didn't deserve to be there, whatever that means. But like the fact that like, yeah, it's an open playing field, and people's approach to not even just yoga and meditation, but like those outcomes and benefits, what they are for them, right? So wellness and well-being in general, like that, like anyone can hang up their shingle, right?
Yep.
Right. So how does anyone decide? And they're going to decide in terms of like how it resonates. And that won't always be the person with the most credentials.
Which is interesting because so there's an interesting strain, and I'd love to get your opinion on it, your beliefs on it. 1850s with the globalization, you had the British and the Scandinavians developed these calisthenic body practices that didn't really exist before, and then brought it to India, and then that merged with Indian philosophy, with the Bhagavad Gita, which had a lot of theosophist, Madame Blavatsky kind of influencing yogic philosophy, and this like weird combination of globalization and spirituality and New Age thought. And then it came back to America with people like Yogananda and Krishnamurti and all these other people, and then created this American version of it. And now it's like spread back to India. And so, like you said, and then there's this melding of science and yoga as well. They tried to apply yoga to science and tried to apply science to yoga. And so and anybody could say whatever they wanted. And because most of the meditation practice had been lost in the East, just in the same way in the West, we'd lost access to the Greeks and the Greek philosophy and things like that. And so like, it's this rediscovery, but in that rediscovery, we changed it. What do you think about this and about, the future of yoga? And maybe it doesn't even matter that whether it's authentic or not, whether it's historically true, whether these practices have been around for a long time or not. What do you think?
Well, I think lineage will always be important. I think, there are multiple lineages, right? And like Ashtanga, Iyengar, like Vinyasa yoga, and there will be newer ones, right? And whether one lineage is more true than the other, I don't know if we ever get to know. I mean, there's definitely like, Ashtanga was invented just to exhaust teenage boys so they'd sit and meditate, right? Like it wasn't meant to like do all this other stuff, but like so like one school of thought is, right? I'm not saying that's right. I still like help produce the Ashtanga Dispatch podcast. So like big love for Ashtanga. I love you, Peg. But so like the idea though that the idea that lineage won't be important seems wrong to me. But at the same time, like your point about like, well, we're adding like science to yoga, and you're like yoga and meditation in particular, like they have evidence bases now, like peer reviews, like stuff that we didn't have even 20, 30 years ago. And so the fact that we've applied, okay, the knowledge and tools we have today, which we didn't have back then, and we've applied those to, this practice that has like in itself, like developed over time. It was born of one thing, you know, like went through a kind of adolescence and has matured into something, and at the same time has been diluted all along the way. It reminds me of like the Bible a little bit, right? Like, but like, and it's used and weaponized in different ways to make some people right, some people wrong. And my thought is that like we are always creating like the future of yoga right now, whether we want to or not. Like, right? Like Ompractice has some say in the future of yoga if we do it right. Or hopefully, I mean, hopefully as an example, not a warning, right? And like, so that means a lot to me. I mean, like, not to be like too narrow about, oh, well, this is just me, but like, okay, like we are among the earliest people doing this. So like, I feel, and I know I speak for my co-founder, Sam, and like the rest of our team, like we have we feel an immense obligation to do it right. Right. And like to be responsible stewards of this, because it can be misused so easily. And at the same time, how do we tackle the history, and at the same time of like also where people really are, right? And so like I can't make someone in Kansas who just wants to move their body in a way that makes them feel alive, I can't make them wrong because they don't know what the yamas and niyamas are. You know what I mean? Like, but to your point, what we can do is we can create access. I'm like, ooh, goosebumps. So like, that's what I live for, right? It's like, how do we make access and like give people choices? So we can do Dharma talks, right? We can add those options, but we can't jam it down people's throats, and we can't make them wrong. And I know early on, sort of as you were like talking about starting a business, I was like, early on, I was like, every class should be 90 minutes. Every class. And if you're not doing that, you're wrong. like it's wrong. It's not yoga. And like now you see like, oh, we have 25-minute classes, because like I also realized like, oh, that is helpful for me to be like, have my these are the rules of what's right in yoga. And like I had to really check myself of like, oh, that's just like, that's Chris's hang up. That's not actually yoga. It's that's me like implementing like my view on everybody else, and like it's dangerous as a founder because it's super easy to do.
That's a really interesting point. There's a lot of different ways we could go from there. The Nicholas Nassim Taleb talks about this thing called the Lindy effect, which is as the older something is, the more anti-fragile, he calls it, it is. So, you know, like the Greeks, every thought that we've had, the Greeks talked about it and wrestled with it and came up with these things that have lasted a very long period of time. So if you want a source of authority to think about, probably want to go there first and then think about it. And then, so yoga has that as well. These thoughts have been wrestled with for a very long time. And even within like Sankhya philosophy, or the axial age around 500 BC, when the Greeks were thinking of their stuff as well, in India, they basically wrestled with every single philosophical tradition that the Greeks also wrestled with. We just don't, it's not in the popular conception. It's not in the popular realm of what's accessed. So we had Lindy effect. And so you want to, if you want to be safe, it's a good idea to wrestle with things that have been wrestled with for a long time and kind of go to authorities. But the key thing that I'm wondering about as we step into this future is that the problems we are facing today are now at a scale that we have never faced before. So it is maybe not necessary in order to innovate we also need to step into the unknown, and actually, because the principles themselves are changing, about climate, about humanity, consciousness, all these different things. So those are starting to change. So we can't necessarily rely on these long-term authorities to find out what truth is as well. I don't really have a point here, but except
no, it makes you think. I think in a previous podcast you talked about like we might even be like on our way to eliminating death, right? Mm-hmm. And like I remember listening to that and being like, see, death is my favorite part. I mean, like for me, like it took one of my teachers, like we talked to like Shavasana corpse poses, like, dude, you just practice dying over and over and over, so you can like be at peace with dying, and you will change your own life as a result, because you don't operate from like, how do I prevent death? How do it makes me nervous when people are like, I gotta live to 150. I have to we have to be immortal. I'm like,
yeah.
Well, I'm scared of not being here. Like there's fear, there's real fear in that. And it's like, it's funny. Like, yeah, like I think yoga, like yoga tends to wrestle with some of those things even now, just like, what is your feeling about death? Like how, like all of these things that, like you said, like are developing in scale, are being exacerbated. There is a way to practice in a way that allows you to hopefully contemplate and contribute to
And also from that makes me think about the small individuated self versus the larger self, and the what a lot of yogis talked about, essentially, that everything as it is right now is divinely perfect. Yes, there are issues, human issues, problems, climate change, all these difficult issues, but in the end, in the universal eternal sense, like it's all going to work itself out, not necessarily in a way that humans enjoy because it's just uncomfortable. Right. Yeah.
Well, we do like to think of us as the center of all the things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, well, yeah. So like from that, like it comes like the whole pain is suffering, or pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. Mm-hmm. Like that does ring true to a point. The one thing that kind of shows up for me in terms of what you're talking about though is like, I think often it's easy to let resignation come in and just sort of like, oh, well, if it's all gonna yeah, well, I guess then we're all screwed then, and it'll all work itself out in thousands of years. And like, I guess I can just it was like just trash the environment because like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
And like, I do worry about that. Like I want people to understand like that they have an impact. And like, I love, there's a teacher, her name is Paige Ellenson. She founded the Africa Yoga Project. And I love that she always says like, it's impossible for you to not make a difference. Right. And a little bit like talking sort of like about the absence, absence of contribution is theft, but like the same idea of like, it's whether you're in action, your action, like it does make a difference, small or large, or whatever. Like it's impossible for you to not make a difference. And to me, I always I think of that because like it keeps me more in the game. Like I still like get stuck in resignation, and like it's really easy because it feels easy. Resignation's easy because you can just like give up. But it's also like that's the sinister stuff. And that's where it's like, oh, you can just like give up on the planet because, well, what can I do? Right.
That's really interesting, and kind of gets into the free will thing as well. And it's like meditation seems to lead to a place where people question the nature of free will. There comes a point at everybody's meditation practice where free will starts to become really important, and then for me, it's been going back and forth. Like I have free will, and the next day, no, I don't have free will, and then it's like it's back and forth every day. I do believe that there is agency, that there are deterministic laws that are based on my environment and based on my genetics and based on previous choices that I've made that are creating the circumstances under which I'm thinking right now. And also the fact that we're having this conversation right now, there's deterministic laws. But then I think within that, there's this sense of, as the current moment unfolds, there's a choice as to whether to come into alignment with what is true or come into alignment with what is false and illusion. And so I think that's where free will comes in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you're also kind of getting at like how the role of your circumstances, right? You know, like in your meditation, like I can't tell you how easy it is and how often I say like people like take their circumstances to be their identity, right? And no matter what you do, you can practice all the yoga you want, but if you're convinced like my circumstances are like should translate into how I feel, like you're screwed. You can't meditate your way out of that at all. Like at some point, like what I love about meditation is like it starts to show like a crack in the door. Like I haven't gotten to the point where I'm at free will yet. So like you are like next level meditator. You might actually be hovering off the ground. Like I'm still at like I like, ooh, I got that spot. And then like the funny thing is, right, you see that spot of like freedom, but in seeing that spot, it's over, right? So like, what I love about that, like it shows a possibility, right? It shows like something is possible, space is possible. But it also like, it makes me question still 10 years later, like, oh, you know, like my circumstances are not who I am. Like they are not my identity, and like they don't have to like define my emotion. Like my emotions are temporary too. Like right. So like I was like one of my teachers like, oh, like I like how often are you super declarative about yourself? Like I am sad, I am sleepy. It was like are you sleepy or are you experiencing sleepiness? Right? Like and it's those little shifts like, oh well I guess I'm not. And it goes back to like I am this, I am not that. But like again, language matters. Like how you talk to yourself is like impacts your meditation, and then meditation over time like shows you, oh, there's a different way to talk to myself, and then in speaking to myself differently, I have a different experience, and oh, that's interesting, that's information, and oh, I think I might want to meditate a little bit more because like I'm liking what I'm seeing, and like that's how I think more people get access to things like meditation is that they see a possibility for a shift in themselves that is, say, like closer to rediscovering their own free will. Or do they have free will, right? Like, but like but again, it's about access. It's about however people get however people see meditation described now is what's going to like make it accessible to them, or what's going to make them feel if it is going to make them see it as something accessible to them or not. And it starts with here are the outcomes, but it also matters who. Frankly, like if you can't see yourself in your teacher, like that again is going to limit who. Like I get worried that like yoga and meditation are something that like women who are white and over 40 and live on the West Coast, like that's who it's for. Urban. And the rest, like to me, that's really dangerous. And it can be a self-fulfilling like prophecy. So like, or not prophecy, whatever. Like but like we spend a lot of time being like, how do we ensure that our teachers reflect the possible student base, right? The like who needs this most, and like if students can't see themselves in their teachers, they're less likely to see it as a possibility for them.
And particularly starting off when you're first kind of in, you know, when we've got this mindset of what is that yoga thing? What is that meditation thing? Oh, that's weird kind of thing. And then in that initial thing, that's really important to find someone who speaks to you. There's a whole like difficulty because then also people end up finding cult leaders that way, the same way, which is like, that's the person who speaks to me. That's also the person asking me to cut out the rest of my family. So it's really, but I think you bring up a really interesting point, which is the platform that you're offering can basically take down a lot of the barriers towards people who wouldn't normally have access to a yoga teacher in an urban environment like San Francisco, which is very expensive to live in and stuff like that. What are you guys doing on that front? Are you creating accessibility for people like in places that don't have access to yoga? What are your thoughts on that?
If we are not opening access, like we need to close this thing. Like we don't need more $35 drop-in classes. We don't need them. And like, I understand like those are market forces at work, and I'm just here to to trash that whole paradigm. And I, like, you know, we rate like, and like our investors understand that's what we're doing. Like that's like that everyone's aligned that like this game is not okay the way it is. And so so access obviously has to be at the top of the thing. So like we started with price initially. Initially, like classes were like $2.
Interesting.
And nobody would take them because they were like, how good could that possibly be? But like, so that was really interesting because initially on our first iteration of this, like teachers were like, how do I, like, I'll just teach like for free or whatever. And like, we had to be like, no, people do want to base something, it turns out. But it just needs to be a really good deal and they can see themselves practicing a lot. And so like, you know, a lot of like research and talking to people. But I mean, I feel like the couple things that we're doing on that, or that we're committed to doing, is price sensitivity. Like you're never not going to be able to, if you like hit us up and be like, I would love to do Ompractice, but I really $24.99 a month. Like I can't do it, but I could do it for $17.99. Like I'll hook you up. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't matter to me. Like, again, like I care about a world in where we have like every human being is fully expressed. And like, if that's what's going to get you there, like, hell yeah. I don't need that extra, you know, like $6 or $7. But what I do need is I need to know people have access. And possibility. So, I mean, part of it's price, part of it is timing. Like how many offices are like, we have lunchtime yoga, and like, how practical is that for anybody? So either you're not going to have lunch, or like, maybe you don't really want to practice around your colleagues, right? Like, so it's the appearance of access, but it's not actually access.
De facto.
So like a lot of it is timing. So, all right, let's do some really early morning stuff, some late night stuff. Let's do more niche stuff. So if people aren't looking for like, you know, like power bang yoga kind of thing, like it's a lineage agnostic platform. Like let's bring Kundalini, let's bring Ashtanga, let's bring like bring it all. Give people options, which has kind of worked against us most recently because now like if you have like 20 or 25 classes, people are like, where do I start?
Option anxiety.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, well, now we have to solve that problem, but that's a problem I asked for. I only get problems I ask for. So, but part of that is also creating access in terms of, like length of class, type of class, time of day. Because, people have, and then, but it's also like, come as you are. So I can't tell you how many like pets and kids are just like running around class. And like, that's awesome. Like, because you weren't going to go otherwise. You just weren't. You weren't going to pay for a babysitter to go to yoga. We're gonna pay for a dog sit, like, but it's okay. Like, you know, my dog's laying on my mat right now, but like I can't tell you how many classes there are where there's a kid just like underneath their parents in like downward dog. Like, right, like half the time, like when you're teaching yoga, right, like your hope is, I want you to bring this into your life. Awesome. You're practicing in the middle of your real life. Like, this is great. This is a big win for everybody.
And the less conditions you put on it, the easier it is to bring into your daily life as well.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing is like, there's like, you know, people sign up and they're like, oh, I can do this. And it's like, you just watch them like, like they go from one class to like, I mean, our monthly people practice 3 to 4 times a week. That's a lot. Now, like, what do you do 3 or 4 times a week?
Yeah. And in the driving time, there's no driving time. That's the biggest thing. It's like, there's no 20, 30 minutes. Yeah, exactly. That's so interesting.
You don't need to take 2 buses to class. You don't need to like get on the subway. But also, and I think this is important, the teachers are paid well because the way we make our money is not on the backs of teachers, which frankly is like,
and the key thing you've taken out of the equation is space, the cost of space, which is in most places in urban environments is the biggest cost. Is San Francisco. The reason why it costs, $35 for a class is because the yoga studio makers, it's not a good business to be in a yoga studio either. Like
margins are tight.
Yeah.
So like, but it was born as a platform for me to teach, right? Like, so like, this was built. It just turned out solving the teacher's problems solved a lot of the students' problems. I got lucky on that one, right? Super lucky. But like that has been why we can be like, we are committed to paying teachers well. And it used to be like, come one, come all, tells you shit. Like now we've hit like 50 plus teachers and like a lot more than like, we had to be like, shut it down. Because like at some point, like we need to also be known for treating the teachers really, really well. We haven't dipped low on that, and I don't want to get to a point where like, oh, we went too far. So it's one of those things where like, okay, now we have to work with who we've got, but like I want 5,000 teachers on you know what I mean? Like I want like at some point there's a version of this where like a new teacher can start here, right? And get reps, because reps make you a better teacher, like actually doing the thing, just like a practitioner. Like the more you practice, the more like whole your practice becomes. Better you are isn't like maybe like more seasons you become. Same with being a teacher. Like you need opportunities, but you also need to match up the expectation of the student and the expectation of the teacher.
That's really cool. Yeah, one idea I had for Access, I don't know if it's interest to you at all, but finding schools and giving them like discounted or kind of thing. Have you thought about that? Like going to schools and
we did a pilot with a school in New Jersey where we like had the teacher kind of like remote on like, so the teacher went in the first time on site. Who I like and did that, and like it was a really good experience. And again, like highly credentialed, right? Teaches this teacher taught yoga in New York public schools already. Like, so not somebody who's like, I like to teach kids, right? Or like, I like to teach. I bet I'd like teaching kids. Like, no, you know how to do this. And like, it's the same thing. Like we do that with any of our stuff. So like, it's not like, oh, I just would really like to teach a back pain class. Like, no, you're credentialed in that. Same with postnatal and prenatal. Same with veterans, right? Like there's a little bit of hero worship in the yoga world where it's like, I just want to be seen teaching athletes. No, if you're going to teach folks, it's because like you understand how to serve them, serve their body, serve what their agenda is. But so yes, we did do a pilot with a school. It turns out working with a school district is not easy.
Yep.
It's not scalable with the size of our team. So we have this really great case study of like, here's where we worked with the school. We did like 3 classes, like 1 in person, 2 virtual. Like it was cool. The kids liked it. And I mean, the cool thing is like now kids know how, like 10 years ago, kids were being told by their parents, like, oh, you should try yoga or whatever. And now kids are telling their parents, like, you need to try yoga. Like, but it is funny. It's almost like, it's not like kids in school who need it as much as their parents who are just cases, you know? Yeah, that's been my experience with kids so far. But yes, exactly. So, but what you're talking about also applies to assisted living. That also applies to like working on like an oil rig, you know, like where like people who are like either at a moment in their life where yoga could serve them well, or at a place. And yeah, like the possibility, like we can work on anything, but we can't work on everything yet. But like, what are the communities where we can make an impact where they're currently underserved? And I think you're absolutely right. Like there's schools, and then there's like sort of that whole other side of the continuum where it's like, yeah, and there's also like a lot of other people who are feeling alone and who have like been stashed away by their family. But like, all right, how do we help?
That is something I want to note, which is really interesting, which is that I found a lot of times, both when other people are suggesting ideas to me that for something I've been working on for a long time, and I just suggested to you an idea, and of course you had already tried it out. And I love that about like starting a company, because when you're starting a company, you and other people are totally focused on this problem. And so pretty much everything that anybody else could come in and think about, like, oh, that's a really good idea, probably already been solved. And then there's one other thing that reminded me. Oh yeah, the focus thing, about focusing on one particular thing. You, as a startup founder, you've got a whole bunch of things. You guys have a whole bunch of different avenues you could focus on, but figuring out which one to focus on is the key issue.
Yeah, and for us, it will remain one. Like, so for example, you know, like we are working with like a huge health insurer here in New England, right? And they are about to make us a reimbursable benefit, which they do for like yoga studio, right? So like there's we have to focus on that. But we also have a number of apartment buildings in New Jersey and New York that use us as part of like an amenity packet. Okay, well, they have like 10,000 more buildings across the country. Maybe it's that. And like at that point, we could be chasing a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we've had to sit down as a team and be like, where are if this all dies, like what are the hills we'd want to die on, right? Chasing apartment buildings, or is it working with health insurers that, like to your earlier point, are like creating access to underserved communities? And I'm not saying that's necessarily the case, but like we have to ask ourselves, like, okay,
at the right time,
most values aligned for us.
Yep.
Because we'll focus on it better, frankly, anyway, right?
Yep.
Not that like I'm not willing to like. I want the company to be successful, and and revenue is a part of that. Like, so like we're not like going to just like cut something off because we're so singularly focused on one vertical. But it's really been challenging because there's so many things we could do and frankly want to do. I'm excited. Like, we're going to be hiring another member of our team for that exact reason, where it's like, okay, we know we can do some more community development in these areas, and we want someone to just tackle, like, that's their job. Like, go for it and bring all your skills to bear there. Because it can be a distraction where you just keep like toe in the water, toe in the water, toe in the water, toe in the water. But at the same time, like at some point we have to commit.
That's where faith comes in, I think, is so interesting, because faith is such an interesting thing, particularly for people who grew up in Christian, and I'm talking both at the founder level and at the yoga level, like having faith. And this is something I learned from Nietzsche, from somebody telling me about Nietzsche, which is that the world is mysterious. The world operates in ways that I can't model, but I must come to a conclusion, and I must act from that conclusion, knowing that I will be wrong, or that being wrong is a possibility.
Right.
And that's where faith comes in, basically.
Yeah, and I think honestly, like the people saying, "Oh, you're doing something based on faith," like there's faith, but there's also like layers of faith under that faith, right? Like I have faith it's the right choice because I have faith in these people doing it, and I have faith in our conversations about it, and I have faith in their commitment. And like, so like there's like, it's not only just like one decision. It really is like it's piled. It's like a faith pile. And I think that's important to recognize, that it's not like there's a or let's just say a foundation rather like there's a solid foundation, and whatever the faith of the next choice should be, like whatever foundation feels most solid is probably right, even if it doesn't look right now, because the world's going to change in 10 minutes anyway.
Yep.
And what is that like? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Like, yeah.
This has been a really cool conversation. I really appreciate you coming on. Just so people can find out more about Ompractice, where can they find it?
They can find it at ompractice.com or Ompractice on any handle, on a social network. And take a class. Let me know. Like, my email is chris@Ompractice. So if you send me an email, I'm gonna read it. Cool. And love to know what people think.
And is there any therapeutic yoga right now? Do you have any therapeutic yoga teachers? I guess Leslie Kamenhoff would. Yeah,
well, I'm trying to think of, so again, like yoga therapy, like that can be like, some people use it as a catch-all, and it's actually shouldn't necessarily be a catch-all. So no, I don't have any therapeutic teachers, or that I think a class would be called therapy. And also I don't have them. Sorry. I have to catch myself all the time. But so there's teachers who lead like yoga for lower back pain, for neck and shoulder, like that kind of thing, some targeted stuff. And again, like credentialed in that. But I don't know if there's a catch-all like yoga therapeutics.
Yeah.
I know there is an entire association of that, so I'm going to have to do some work. See?
Well, yeah. So I can give you a quick, I studied to become a yoga therapist. I've got certified in yoga therapeutics. And I was also studying to become a yoga therapist. Yoga therapist is, according to the IAYT, their guidelines, yoga therapist is somebody who specifically works one-on-one with somebody to use the mechanisms of yoga and the philosophy of yoga to apply a prescriptive treatment on that person. And then yoga therapeutics, Harvey Deutsch is the main one to look for. This is a group class with the principles of yoga, not a gentle yoga class, but a yoga that is based in physiological and science as to what the body is doing, and how to apply a practice in a group setting that helps people find a yoga that is not harmful,
right,
and potentially therapeutic. Yeah.
Well, please come on and teach it.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Stuart. I love doing it.